Hi all, I am Rasel from the University of Sydney, working with Gravitational Astrophysics group. Today I will present one of my research projects entitled Cosmology with Stacked with Gravitational Lensing and Doppler Lensing. This is the very general overview of my talk. At first, I will discuss the theory of weak lensing and Doppler lensing effect. Then I will explain our n-body simulations and methodology. Finally, I will discuss some results on stacked weak gravitational lensing and Doppler lensing analysis. Weak gravitational lensing is now a very common phenomena to the astronomers. The distortion of images when light bundles are deflected by the mass distribution of large-scale structure. It provides the most efficient way of measuring the distribution of matter density in the universe. It is also a powerful probe to study the nature of dark energy. The patterns of the distorted images of the light bundles from the distant galaxies along the line of sight resulting the cosmic shear. That provides a strong window to find out more information about the expansion of the universe and the evolution of the cosmic structure for the advancement of modern observational astronomy. In that figure, you can see how a circular shape source distorted as an ellipse due to the intervening large scale structure. So, what statistical quantities we can measure from weak gravitational lensing? The first one is convergence, that is the integrated mass density along the line of sight. The second one is magnifications, that tells us how much magnified or demagnified the image. And the third one is shear, that is the stretching along the axis. So now let's discuss about Doppler lensing. Doppler lensing is the apparent change in object size and magnitude due to the peculiar velocity of the source galaxies. This effect dominates over the usual gravitational lensing magnification at low redshifts. It can be calculated by using these equations where this is can use the Doppler convergence. Hayes is the Hubble parameters. Chi-s is the source galaxy distance. Z-s is the source redshifts. Vs is the velocity of source galaxy, and n is the direction of photon propagations. If the dot product of these, that means the velocity of source galaxy and the direction of photon propagation is greater than 0, that indicates that the objects are moving towards us and the Doppler convergence is less than 0. If this dot product is less than 0, that indicates that the objects are moving away from us and the Doppler convergence is greater than 0. To discuss more about Doppler convergence, we can revisit to this paper um, where they have discussed about some basic of Doppler convergence. For example, let's for this simple example of the left side figure, there is an overdensity of matter and several galaxies in and around it. Galaxies that are pulled in by the overdensity acquire some velocity towards its center. In this figure, you can identify three galaxies, A, B, and C. A sits at the center of the overdensity and it has a physical size S. B and C are in falling into the overdensity and they have the same physical size as A. Why am I talking about physical sizes? Since the universe expands, there are several definitions of distances in cosmology. Because B is falling away from the observer, it appears redshifted by the Doppler effect. C is moving towards the observer as it falls, appearing blue shifted. Consider for a moment that the amount of red and blue shifting makes the red shifts of A, B, and C to appear to be the same, and that all three galaxies have the same physical size. Compared to typical galaxies, at the redshifts of A, B will look larger and C will look smaller than those galaxies. So, what do sizes of galaxies have to do with cosmology? If this effect were measured, it would provide information about the velocities of galaxies. Because these velocities develop due to the infall towards overdensities, the sizes of galaxies can be related to the properties of the density fluctuations, and they could enable test of theories of dark energy, the energy behind the accelerated expansion of the universe, and the modified gravity. Another mechanism that relates the observed size of galaxies to the properties of our universe is lensing magnification. So lensing magnification is the apparent changes in size of galaxy because a meta density over density that is along the line to that galaxies behaves like a lens, and the magnifications and Doppler lensing have opposite behaviors. For a galaxy behind an overdensity, Doppler lensing reduces its apparent size while magnification increases it. Both effects also change the apparent brightness of galaxy. So in the right panel, figure shows the x-axis is the redshift and the y-axis is the inversely proportional to the angular separation between two galaxies. The line which symbolize where one effect cancels the others shows that at low redshifts and large separation, Doppler lensing is more important than magnifications in determining the observer size of a galaxy. When studying the large-scale structure of the universe, it is common tool to build correlation functions. So correlation functions tell you, for example, what the probability is of finding two galaxies separately by some distance. This probability depends on how the matter in the universe is distributed and on the composition of the universe. The correlations means how related those two observables are. In Doppler lensing, the correlation functions can be computed that relate, for example, the positions of galaxies to the size of second galaxy as a function of the distance between them. So the concept and motivations. So these are some questions that inspired us to do this research, starting from the path of photon is whether is it straight or curved, whether there are any effect on the mass distribution of cosmic structures, um, how weak lensing and Doppler lensings varies due to the mass distributions of the cosmic structures, etc. Now let's discuss about our simulations um, and the ray tracing algorithm. The n-body code we have used here is gevolutions. This is the first simulation of cosmic structure formation using the framework of Einstein's general theory of relativity. Here is the FLRW line element where A and tau are the scale factor and conformal time respectively. Phi and psi are the scalar perturbations, Bi is the vector perturbations, and Hij is the tensor perturbations. In this work, we have only considered the two scalar perturbations because these perturbations have the maximum effect on the light propagations. Our ray tracing algorithm is very general and you can add more perturbations as you wish. For testing purpose, we have computed the weak lensing shear by considering only scalar potentials and by considering both scalar and vector potentials and plot the PDF of the shear, and you can see the distributions of the shear is nearly equal when you consider only scalar potentials and when you consider both scalar and vector potentials. So to minimize the time as well as the space, uh, we um, we have we did not consider the other perturbation effects in our analysis. The ray tracing algorithm here I have developed that solves null geodesic equations backwards from observer to sources. Here is the geodesic equations and the gamma ABC is the Christoffel symbols, and in every steps of the integration it will tell the photon what directions it should go. Instead of projecting single photon, we projected it as a bundle of photon having circular shape as like this figure. We have considered the co-moving distance of our simulation box is 320 megaparsec per ace, and when photon reaches edge of the box, then we read next snapshots so that photon travels box to fulfill the desired redshifts. So how we can calculate the weak lensing statistics from our algorithm? So from the ratio of initial and final shape of the bundles, we can calculate the magnification. By using ellipse fitting algorithm, we can measure the orientation of an ellipse and compute the shear. And from the informations of magnification and shear, we can compute the convergence by using this formula. To find cosmological structures, I have used publicly available code Rockstar that can provide the information of the positions of halos and the mass of halos. I have also used another publicly available code, Pylians, that can provide the position of voids and the radius of voids. In the left panel figure of this slide, you can see the different color circles with different radius are the voids, and the gray color indicates the particle distribution of the simulation volume. The right panel figure shows the clustered halo mass and the particle distributions. The gray color indicates the particle distributions, whereas the different colored dots are the halos with different mass range. Here, the 11.5, 12.5 is in the order of 10, and the unit is solar mass per ace. You can see that massive halos are located in the more clustered zone than the less massive halos. Um, that makes sense. Now let's discuss some results of our stacked weak lensing statistics. To compute the weak lensing statistics by stacking cosmic voids and halos, at first we ran 21 gevolution simulations for different initial by changing initial conditions. that can be done um, by changing the seeds, but we have considered the identical cosmological parameters. Then from the particle snapshots, we find the necessary information of halos and voids by using Rockstar and Pylians at redshift z equals to 0.22. We keep the observer fixed at redshift 0, and by slightly varying the projection angles, we project bundles of photons in the directions of cosmic voids, having three different ranges of voidity, and the cosmic halos having three different masses of the halos. We keep our observer fixed at the center of our simulation box and determine the normal vectors from the observer's location to each projection directions using the Euler-Rodriguez formula. Each of these normal vectors corresponds to the initial directions of a particular ray bundle. From the solutions of the geodesic, we get the positions of the bundles of photons for each integration step, and to fit it into an ellipse, we use an ellipse fitting algorithm to compute the area, semi-major and semi-minor axis of an ellipse. Then we compute the magnifications from the ratio of the area of the final shape of the bundle to the area of the initial shape of the bundle, since we integrate backward from the observer to the sources. From the information of the semi-major and semi-minor axis of an ellipse, we can compute the shear. By using our algorithm. So in this figure, the top left figure shows the projected surface mass density, which is proportional to the magnification as a function of impact parameter, and the differential surface mass density, which is proportional to the shear as a function of impact parameter at redshift z equals to 0.6. The numerical results of the weak lensing magnifications is higher near the center of the halos, while it gradually decreases with the increases of impact parameter. We obtained a higher value of magnifications in the center of the halos because the density distribution is higher there. In compared to the clustering masses of the halos, we observe that for all cases, the weak lensing magnification is comparatively higher when the bundles of light passes near the massive halos than the less massive halos, because the density distributions of the massive halos is comparatively higher than the less massive halo. The variations of the weak lensing tangential shear as a function of impact parameter at redshift z equals to 0.6 is shown in the left bottom panel. Similar to weak lensing magnification, we observe that the value of the tangential shear is maximum near the center of the halos and gradually decreases when the distance from the center of the halo to the center of the bundles increases. We also observe that the characteristics plot of the tangential shear due to the effect of clustering masses of the halos is opposite to that of the weak lensing magnification. As we have considered the absolute magnitude value of the shear in that case, so the characteristics what we observed for shear are exactly opposite that we observed for weak lensing magnification. So in the right panel figure, we have analyzed for the same characteristics but for void analysis. So we have considered three different ranges of void ready and projected our bundles in the directions of that void ready ranges and computed the projected surface mass density and differential surface mass density. From this figure, it tells that the value of magnifications is decreased close to the center of the void, due to the low density distributions in the center of the voids, as the light bundles can be delensing here due to the lack of substructures at the center of the voids. It is clear from that figure that the properties of weak-lensing magnifications for clustering radii of the voids are opposite that of clustering masses of halos. That means the value of magnifications gradually decreases when bundles of photons approaches closest to the center of the voids. We observe that similar to weak lensing magnifications for clustering radii of voids, the tangential shear of weak lensing magnification, tangential shear of weak lensing magnifications for the tangential shear is lowest near the center of the voids, and increases um, as the distance between the center of the halo and the center of the bundles increases. We also found that the characteristics throughout for the clustering masses of the clustering radius of the voids is similar as like what we have observed for the projected surface mass density. Now this figure shows the Doppler convergence by stacking voids. So how we have computed the Doppler convergence by stacking voids? So at first we by changing the initial conditions, we initially ran 21 gevolution simulations having identical cosmological parameter settings, but use the different random seeds. And then from the particle snapshots of gevolution simulations, we find out the necessary information about the halos and voids at redshifts z equals to 0.22 by using Rockstar and Pylians. These are the same simulations as for the weak gravitational lensing analysis. We find around 1450 voids having radii 20 to 25 megaparsec per ace. As the number of halos inside the voids are very few for smaller voids, so we consider a moderate range of void radius at redshift z equals to 0.22, and beyond the radius of the associated voids, we sort halos inside the voids. We keep the observer fixed at redshift 0. Then we compute the distance from the center of the voids to the center of the halos and divide by the respective void radius to get the dimensionless distances. Then we perform the dot product between the normalized velocities of the halos associated with the voids and the directions of the vectors between the observers and halos. Then we multiply the rest of the parts of the Doppler convergence equations with the results of the dot product and calculate the value of the Doppler convergence and considering the redshifts of the source at z equals to 0.6. After that, we calculated the vector between the center of the voids to the observer and the center of the voids to the halos. And from the dot product of these vectors, we can calculate the cosine theta, where theta is the angle between the line of sight and the line connecting the center of the void to the center of the halos. Finally, we stacked Doppler convergence values for wires having radii 20 to 25 megaparsec per ace. And this figure shows the results of that analysis. If you see the left panel figures of left top of the figures shows the Doppler convergence as a function of impact parameters. So from that figure, it is apparent that the value of Doppler convergence due to underlying meta distributions in the void increases as the distance between the center of the void and the galaxies within the void increases. similar to standard weak lensing as statistical quantities. But we have observed higher values of the Doppler convergence at the edge of the voids because um, uh, because the higher Doppler convergence value at the void is that the because the um, velocity distributions is higher there than in the center, because the Doppler convergence is proportional to the velocity of the source galaxies. And if you see the top right figures, most of the galaxies are situated near the edge of the voids, and their velocity distributions is higher. So that's why we have observed higher values of Doppler convergence at the edge of the void. In the bottom figure shows the mean Doppler convergence values for certain range of distance beams. So we have calculated the Doppler convergence for a certain range of beams, and with 1 sigma variations of the data, you can see the similar properties as like the left figures, because it is the same figure just for a certain range of beams. Now let's see for Doppler convergence for different ranges of void radii. So we have considered three different ranges of void radius for this analysis, and computed the Doppler convergence and plotted as a function of impact parameters. Um, it is found that the Doppler convergence for different ranges of radii of voids is higher at the edge of the voids, and it is also observed that the observer could also measure the magnified image of the source for voids with larger radii than the smaller ones. It is because the number of galaxies in the larger voids is greater than in smaller voids, and the velocity distributions and the density distributions of galaxies are higher at the void edges and compared to the void center. So let's see some comparison between weak gravitational lensing convergence and the Doppler lensing convergence. So in the left panel figure shows the convergence value as a function of impact parameters for both cases. That means for weak lensing and Doppler lensing cases. So in that cases, we have considered the same number of realizations and projected bundles in the directions of cosmic voids having same radius, and then computed the weak lensing convergence by using our ray tracing algorithm, and Doppler lensing by using the formula that we have discussed to compute Doppler convergence. So what we have observed for that case is that the weak lensing convergence increases as a function of impact parameters, and at the edge of the voids, the weak lensing convergence is going to nearly zero. Uh, but what's happened for Doppler convergence? We have seen that as like weak lensing convergence, the Doppler convergence also increases as a function of impact parameters, but the Doppler convergence measures, but the Doppler lensing measures larger values of Doppler convergence at the void edge, because the number of galaxies in larger because the number of galaxies and the galaxies and the density distributions as well as the velocity distributions of that galaxies is higher, are higher at the voids edge than the void centers. That's why we have measured higher values of Doppler convergence at the void edge as compared to the weak lensing convergence. For both cases, the source redshifts we have the source redshifts is at z equals to 0.6. So So the comparison between the Doppler convergence and weak lensing convergence as a function of redshifts is depicted in the right panel figures. You can see the variations of the Doppler convergence and the weak lensing convergence. So the shaded region shows the 1 sigma variations for each redshift bins of the data. So what we observed from this figure that at lower redshifts, the convergence value due to Doppler lensing dominates over the standard weak gravitational lensing, whereas at higher redshifts, the convergence value due to Doppler lensing drops. Since the factor in the brackets in the Doppler convergence equations decreases, while the convergence value due to weak lensing increases. So this is also interesting findings because um, to for future weak lensing survey, we need to consider the weak lensing and sorry, we need to consider the Doppler lensing effects at lower redshifts to get the great good precisions in our observational data. So So, in conclusions from the above analysis of our works, that we suggest that the projected surface mass density, which is proportional to the magnification, and differential surface mass density, that is proportional to the shear, influenced by the mass distributions of the cosmic structures. The Doppler lensing dominates weak lensing at low red shifts, and the weak lensing dominates Doppler lensing at higher red shifts. We also observed that objects on the far side of the voids are larger than the expectations of the standard weak lensing. um, this results of this work that we present that I present here will be important for future weak lensing survey where percent level precision is important. Um, the combining these two lensing effect could be important to get right picture of the universe, and also study the higher order statistics like angular power spectrum, bispectrum could be interesting, and we left it for our future study. I want to give my special thanks to my collaborators, and thanks to all. If you have any questions, then feel free to ask me in the Slack platform. Also, you can ask me the questions in the comment sections of the YouTube channel. Yeah, thank you all.